It is the Batley and Spen by-election. So I thought we could maybe share election night rituals if we have any.
Ooh.
And I've got somebody who sat through a lot of elections. Emily Thornberry, Shadow International Trade Secretary. Hello, Emily.
Hello.
Do you have a by-election or an election ritual or a referendum ritual? There's many different types of votes.
I always wear red.
Okay.
I have a particular badge that I wear.
Which is?
I don't know, just a big rosette, you know.
Oh, right, okay.
And I kind of think, I still believe that it's the same rosette I've worn every year, but it might not be. It might have got lost and I might have replaced it, but I'm not quite sure because during elections you just get so tired. But I think I've still got the original rosette that I've always worn in all elections. And fortunately, so far, they've always been successful.
Laura, any little rituals? Working incredibly hard.
Try and sleep during the day, which never works.
Yes.
Phone lots of people during the day saying, what have you heard? What have you heard? And then they go, what have you heard? What have you heard? And then round we go. And then overnight, I think I've told you my rule before, is drink tea overnight and then start drinking coffee in the morning. If you go straight in on coffee at night time, that's disastrous.
Chris Mason?
Carrot at 2 a.m, cherry bakewell at 4 a.m, jelly babies from 6 a.m.
Do not, Chris, tomorrow leave a half-eaten, unpeeled carrot on my desk.
My little signature.
I always like to go for a run. And I remember on the Brexit referendum going for a run along the canal and it was beautiful sunshine. And then as soon as I got home, the heavens opened and it was like the biggest thunderstorm. Ooh, what could that mean?
What omen is that? I don't know. Which way round? Yeah, very good.
Anyway, we are recording this episode of Newscast before the polls close in Batley and a long time before the result is expected at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. But because the polls have closed while you're watching us, we can speculate to our heart's content. It's within the law on this episode of Newscast.
Newscast.
Newscast from the BBC.
Hello, it's Adam in the studio.
And Laura in the same studio, still 2 metres apart. More of that in a moment.
And Chris still entombed in my booth of news just down the corridor, also at Westminster.
And Emily Thornberry is in another cupboard wearing a fetching headset. Hello.
Hiya.
Is it comfortable, that headset?
It's fine.
Okay. We need a bit of an upgrade for our next guest.
It
Okay.
looks good, though. It looks good. It looks like you're about to commentate on something really, really exciting. So hopefully the
But
next
at
half
least
hour...
it's not like those little bit ones they stick in your ear that always falls out. They're always falls out.
Oh, the sort of Britney Spears ones.
Yeah. You know, they stick a bit of tape and then they're always really hoping it's going to work and it never does. And you have to stand there with putting your finger in your ear. This
That's
is
no
much
good.
better.
Anyway, right, that's enough of how television is made. Why did you say we're 2 meters apart for now, ...
Did you think I was doing something cryptic?
Yeah.
Okay, so by the time we're chatting on next week's programme, it is possible that the Prime Minister will have set out his big picture for what he hopes the world will look like after July 19th, when the coronavirus legal restrictions on all the things we're allowed to do, how many people you're allowed to have in your living room, whether you have to wear a mask on the bus. His aspiration, and ministers are increasingly confident, is that they will be able to sweep away pretty much everything. Now, 2 really important caveats. Number 1, cases are still going to be going up by a lot.
As they already are.
As they already are. That means the number of people going to hospital is still going to rise, perhaps quite significantly. But there is increasing confidence every day in government that at least for the summer, the vaccinations have given enough protection that most of, if not all, but most of the legal restrictions will be able to be ditched from July the 19th. But I think it's important also to people to understand, you know, isolation is going to stay somehow. Testing is going to still be a big part of our lives. And they're still not going to be able to rule out restrictions coming back in the winter. But I think we're kind of edging towards quite a kind of, here is the moment where we're going to get back to just about as normal as we might be able to be.
It's a real test of our kind of collective mettle, isn't it? For government in terms of making decision, but then psychologically us trying to adjust to what was normal, particularly if there's a sense that the numbers are going up and particularly if the hospitalisation rate's going up as well.
Yeah, I mean, Emily, do you think Labour will back that?
I think we're going to do what we've been doing, which is that we look very carefully at the science. We make sure that the government is doing as advised and making decisions in a timely way and articulating what it is that we should do clearly. That's all. You can't expect anything more of politicians. I mean, we have really good scientists. That invented the vaccine. It's fantastic. We have our brilliant NHS that's vaccinating everyone. The weak link has been those in government who haven't made decisions in a timely way and haven't made it particularly clear what it is that we're supposed to do. And I think the British people want to do the right thing. They just need to be told what it is.
Well, it's now timely for us to talk about Batley and Spen and the by-election, which is gripping everyone, because for loads of reasons, actually. I mean, first of all, there's just the history of the seat. It was Jo Cox's seat. She was murdered in 2016. Her sister, Kim, is the Labour candidate there now. And then George Galloway appeared from the Workers' Party. And Chris, you were interviewing him a couple of days ago, and here's how he described Keir Starmer, because he basically is using this by-election to get him.
He's wooden, robotic, a desiccated calculating machine that's gone haywire. And I think I'd be doing Labour a favour by helping get rid of him.
It can't be right, though, can it, when the Labour candidate is chased to their car, being shouted at by people?
It's very far from right, but it has absolutely nothing to do with me.
It's really striking being in Batley and Spen, these last couple of days. I've never covered a by-election quite like it, that we would arrange as we were doing, dashing around the constituency, meeting the various candidates, where you would know you were in the place where the Labour team were about to turn up because the police were already there because of the concerns that there's been around the security for Kim Leadbeater, the Labour candidate. There's the video that's been widely circulated on social media of her being harassed in the street. There was a group of activists who were pelted with eggs. And of course that would be grim in any by-election contest, but given the history, Adam, as you say, with Kim being Jo Cox's sister, the constituency is full of reminders of Jo Cox's time as the MP there, a memorial wood, a building built in her name, named after her. And then of course the politics of George Galloway being there, very visible, very noisy. He's got the battle bus that he used in Bradford West 9 years ago, the seat that he won that's just up the road, and the expectation that he's going to take a big chunk of around a fifth of the people locally who are Muslim, of Southeast Asian heritage, and therefore the prospect that the Conservatives could win. But we'll find out, won't we, in a few hours' time.
I mean, Emily, while we were playing that clip, you looked, appalled, really, by George Galloway, I think, is the
I just
only
wondered
way
if he'd been to the dentist today or something. It was that sort of look.
He's just disgusting. I think he's disgusting. He's a misogynist. I think that he's deeply divisive, and he's just a sort of a bucket into which people pour all their feelings of anger. And it's in the end, for him, it's all about him. And the idea that he's doing Labour a favour, give us a break.
The thing is, though, Emily, you talk about George Galloway, as you describe him, as a snake oil salesman. Yeah. I mean, voters aren't stupid, are they? They'll have seen what happened 9 years ago in Bradford, then in the East End of London, and where he won on both occasions. And he's clearly, I could tell the other day, he is connecting with people. He gets the toots in the streets. Yes, he's divisive. There are people who don't like him, but there seem to be plenty that do, and therefore he is achieving something that Labour is failing to achieve.
I think, yes, people around the world have this problem when it comes to highly populist candidates who promise a great deal, who get a great deal of noise, you get a great deal of attention, and people are attracted to them and then realise later that it's a mistake. We can see it, from all kinds of candidates.
No, but bluntly,
he's saying
your leader is useless, and if thousands of people vote for him, then it suggests that they agree.
He's saying all kinds of things. He's saying, for example, that there's nothing wrong with the way the Chinese are treating the Uyghurs. He'll say whatever.
The poster on the wall in the middle of Batley says "Starmer out." It couldn't be clearer.
Yeah, I know. But as I say, he will say whatever he needs to say in order to get enough attention, and that attention in itself attracts people, I think. And I think, as I say, I think that he's a bully. I think he's a misogynist, and I think that he is deeply divisive. And he's standing again. What can you do? All you can do is be truthful, is be hardworking, truthful, get out and talk to people about what really affects them, about how their lives can be changed and what Labour has to offer. What else do you want? What else can we do?
Not to make light of it, though, but Chris is referring to that huge George Galloway poster in the middle of Batley that says "Starmer out." But there are some people in Labour who actually agree and want Starmer out too.
Well, I personally think that that we've not had enough time for Keir to even begin to do the job that he was elected to do. Nobody leading the Labour Party has had, the difficulties that he's had. I mean, even Clement Attlee, had a few years before the war as leader of the Labour Party. But we've had ever since he's been elected, there have been these extraordinary circumstances. He's literally had no platform on which to stand in order to be able to address the party. He hasn't been able to get out and about and see people in the way that a politician would normally do as leader. He's not been able to make his mark in that way. Fortunately, we're coming out of lockdown and it will give him his chance, and we're all looking forward to being able to get back onto the front foot and for Keir to introduce himself and for us to make clear that there is an alternative to this appalling government.
But Emily, what you're suggesting is that Keir Starmer, after 14 months, has not even really begun to introduce himself to the British public. I mean, of course, the pandemic have been extraordinary circumstances, but he's had Prime Minister's questions every week. Of course, the television news and radio news and newspapers and magazines and Piers Morgan's life stories and
but you talk
podcasts
about
like this.
But you talk about Prime Minister's questions. I mean, think about the one that was like yesterday. I mean, what an extraordinary series of questions that was about what the Prime Minister's reaction was to a woman who had been sticking to the rules and had not even been able, her family had not been able to get close to her son as he was dying. And that reaction and that piece of that message, that strong message about how the Prime Minister is and the way that Keir was asking those questions and the forthright way in which, if that chamber had been packed with MPs and the upstairs had been packed with journalists, we wouldn't have been talking about anything else for the next week. I mean, but in a chamber which is stripped of everybody,
Emily, is Angela Rayner, the deputy leader of your party, on manoeuvres?
I read the speculation. It isn't something that I experience when I go to the Shadow Cabinet and see people sitting at the Shadow Cabinet table. We are all focused on making sure that we are a united party.
You've
that
never
we are
heard
putting
the
together
tiniest
a program.
bit of chit chat in
I
private?
have not heard any chit chat apart from journalists.
Hang on, one of your fellow Shadow Cabinet ministers told me that in the meeting she sits there rolling her eyes and looking at her phone.
Well, I've never seen that. I mean, she does go on her phone,
you're
but she's
looking at your
always.
phone?
So she does go on her phone.
She does go. I used to sit next to her in the previous, Shadow Cabinet with Jeremy. She was always on her phone. She's always on her phone. That's how she is. But the idea that we're not all pulling together, that we're not all trying to put together a programme so that we can show the British public what the alternative is just not truthful. And I think it's also part of the thing about lockdown coming down, that you journalists are starting to meet up in pubs, are all chit-chatting away, and then suddenly these stories about splits in the Labour Party come out at about the same time.
Well,
you journalists may be talking about it, but all I can tell you is what I witness, and
What was
I do
Yvette
not
Cooper
witness this.
saying yesterday then? I mean, how did those words tumble out of her mouth?
I didn't hear what Yvette said.
What was it that Yvette Cooper actually said?
So she was asked, as is often the case, isn't it, in the countdown to elections, people are asked to speculate about what might happen afterwards, and she was asked, will Sir Keir Starmer resign if he loses Batley and Spen? The answer that came back from Yvette Cooper, which could have been, along the lines of, well, let's see what happens and blah, 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 was, it is a discussion that we will have afterwards, which seemed to at least imply the possibility that Labour might not win the by-election, but that crucially, if Labour didn't, there would then be a conversation, as opposed to, I'm sure we're going to win, and he was elected and he'll still be there at the next election, which I guess you could have said.
I still think it's a dead ball answer. Nobody has said we're sure that we're going to win Batley and Spen. We have always said it's going to be a tough battle. We may win. We hope we're going to win. We should win. We have a really good candidate, but we don't take the public for granted. It's up to them, whether they elect him or not.
I suppose, Emily, though, you are a very experienced politician. You ran for the leadership yourself. You must at least, or do you deny that there are jitters in the Labour Party about Keir Starmer's ability to cut through? And yes, there have been extraordinary circumstances this year, but it is not the fact that journalists can just go to the pub again that is generating these sorts of conversations. Surely you must accept that.
Of course we would want to be doing better in the polls. Of course we would want to win every by-election as they come up. But in the real world, we are in lockdown. And in the real world, what we need to do is keep our heads, keep clear, keep our eye on what the prize is, which is what the shadow cabinet is doing. The prize is winning the next general election. We cannot make any difference to this country unless we win the general election, become the government. And we need to keep united and keep behind a leader who's only just been elected and frankly hasn't been given a chance yet.
That's the quite polite, nice, friendly way of telling those people to be quiet, isn't it, Laura?
Eye on the prize. I think so.
Yeah. Anyway, and we should just say, so the Angela Rayner rumours came, well, they've been floating around for a while anyway, but they ended up on the front page of The Times today with the headline saying Rayner supporters prepared leadership challenge to Starmer. In other words, friends or allies or colleagues of Angela Rayner were calling people around saying, would you support her if there was a leadership challenge? And then when that front page emerged last night, Angela Rayner tweeted at 11:07, the story, quote unquote, on the front page of The Times tomorrow is news to me. And her spokesperson denied it in quite strong terms too. But then she might not have known it was happening. So both things could be true simultaneously.
Both things could be true, and there could have been a meeting of the Socialist Campaign Group today, and there could perhaps have been conversations involving John McDonnell and former... There could have been all sorts of things going on.
Yes.
We will see, but stand by for a... Who knows what the result will be? And of course, by the time you're listening or watching to this, we may know the result. And what I would say is, everybody I've talked to, and Chris, you've actually been there, but I mean, trying to find out what's going on the ground. People are saying it's a really difficult by-election to call. And I've heard some really wild things. Someone even said, oh my God, Labour might come third. And I thought, wow. And then somebody else said, well, actually, Labour might hang on. The Tories aren't sure. It's very difficult to call because there's so many strange factors at play. So we'd be really daft to try and call it tonight.
Shall we talk about steel? I want to talk about steel because it has a nostalgic feel from our Brexit cast days. And also, you know, big questions around a strategic industry and what the government does with the new powers it has after Brexit. And Adam, when I was reading about this story, I thought this has got Mr. Fleming written all over it.
Yes.
Not least, the Trade Remedies Authority.
Yes. Something Emily and I discuss very often in her role as Shadow International Trade Secretary. And that is actually true. So this is my ideal story because it's about what's life going to be like after Brexit, what's the government actually going to do, and then it's got a bit of last-minute jeopardy as well, and something you could call a U-turn, but they would say isn't. So basically what it is, right? So back when Trump put tariffs on the imports of steel into America, the EU introduced these things called safeguards, which are basically quotas on the imports of steel so that you wouldn't then get a giant glut of very cheap steel diverted from America to the EU. We inherited those safeguards when we left the EU, and on the last day of June, they either had to be renewed or gotten rid of. Now, the Trade Remedies Authority, which has been set up as an independent body on the 1st of June, by the way, to tell the government what it should do, recommended keeping 10 of the safeguards and ditching 9 of the others. The government were then like, oh, actually, we'd like to keep another 5 as well. But the law says we either take everything you recommend to us or nothing that you recommend to us. So actually, we're going to pass a new regulation which will let us do our own number of safeguards, ignoring the Trade Remedies Authority within its first month of existence. And they're now going to review the whole structure of how it works. So it's a bit of a trial and error process.
I think you've done very well getting through that so clearly.
That was like just a minute, wasn't it?
It was amazing. Emily, as in your role, looking at that, watching the government ignore this new authority, like straight off the bat, what's your take?
Well, the Trade Remedies Authority was flawed right from the start. It didn't have anybody from steel on it. It didn't have any employers. It didn't have any trade unionists. It had a couple of very senior guys from the Department of International Trade leading it, being chair and chief executive. They thought that their role was to support buccaneering Britain going around the world. And instead of being there to protect British industry, they thought that their role was in fact to lower tariffs and to generate more trade as a result. But obviously it would have a dire impact on a really important strategic industry in Britain.
How could they have somebody from steel on it? Because if you had somebody from literally every industry in Britain, the Trade Remedy Authority would have like 50,000 people on it.
Okay, well, have somebody from manufacturing. I mean, seriously, you know, have somebody from manufacturing, have someone from the unions, but they didn't have either. And, you know, their focus was very much more all about, you know, what's the effect on the customer, and, you know, which is, you know, if you start arguing that, what's the effect on the customer? Okay, in the short term, you might get cheaper Chinese steel dumped on us. But of course, if it then means that our industry just collapses, then they've got us by the short and curlies. They can then charge whatever price they want when we need to have steel for strategic reasons, whether it's building bridges, ships, everything else, buildings. We need steel for all of those things. And we need to have a modern steel industry that needs to have some proper investment.
Is protectionism a good thing then?
Well, no, not when. Listen, given that America has all these protections, given that Europe has all of these protections, the very fact that we don't have protections means we're kind of, putting a great big target on ourselves, saying, go on, hit us, ruin our steel industry. I mean, really. And we have been warning the government for some time about this, and they finally said they were going to do something about it. Talk about the 11th hour. I mean, honestly, it was like a minute to midnight. It was 7 o'clock. They were supposed to put out a statement by 7 o'clock. Bang on 7 o'clock, they put out a statement saying, "Okay, we're going to change the law."
And guess what? I was in a pub with some journalists proving Emily's theory totally right.
Emily, what would you do with the Trade Remedies Authority then? Because you've got this organisation that's been going for about 3/4 of an hour.
Reading. It's in Reading.
It's immediately, had its first suggestion sort of poo-pooed. Who on earth would want to be on it? Do you even need it? I mean, what would you do with this kind of new infrastructure that's meant to sort of help make these decisions happen?
Well, the point is that what sort of agenda they had. And the difficulty is if you end up with senior people from the Department of International Trade, and the ethos of the Department for International Trade is let's be buccaneering Britain, let's open our doors and start, trading freely, and whatever wants to come into our country is fine. Then it will have a profound effect, whether it's in agriculture, whether it means that we end up awash with all kinds of food produced with all sorts of lower standards and from lower farming standards, or whether it's our steel industry collapsing. I mean, it may be in a sort of jungle world that they seem to think is a great thing. Then new industries will come forward, but the disruption that will be caused in the meantime, and when I say disruption, I mean unemployment. I mean jobs going, factories closing, plants closing. I mean, do we want to go through all of that, or do we want to do it?
They've concluded no, haven't they? I mean, that's why they've come to the conclusion that they have.
They have come to the conclusion that they have at the very last hour. Yes, but the point is that the TRA that they set up seemed to have a very odd ethos about what it was that they thought their job really was. And I think that it needs to take a step back, and it needs to be looking at how do we make sure that that we continue to encourage international trade, but also take reasonable steps where there are unfair practices, where there is dumping going on, to protect our industries, to ensure that our economy remains healthy.
And while we're on three-letter acronyms like the TRA for the Trade Remedies Authority, the Department for International Trade, the DIT, some wag told me this week that one of our trading partners calls the DIT the Department for Instagramming Truss, because there are so many pictures of Liz Truss signing trade deals.
Was that a wag in a pub, by any chance?
No, it was on a phone call.
Oh, right.
In a non-drinking environment.
That's very good.
Anyways,
Talking of international trade,
yes.
Emily, well, there was big actual trading news for a very big international company that is going to hire a lot more people here. Nissan, who people will have been probably remember, were very concerned about the impact Brexit might have, are building a massive new battery plant in the northeast. Now, of course, Boris Johnson has sort of hailed this as this proves all the doomsters about Brexit wrong. Emily, as somebody who was very much Boris Johnson would have perhaps unfairly castigated you as a Brexit doomster. What do you say to this?
I think it's fantastic news. It's fantastic news. You will, of course, remember, Laura, that in our manifesto we said that we should have this. We should have 4 of them, in fact.
Yeah.
And that we needed to have public money go in to assist, because if we're going to have electric cars, then we need to make sure that we're making them at home. We need to support our car industry, and we need to be at the forefront of a green revolution. So all of this is great stuff. I don't know the details, and the government aren't giving us the details as to how much public money has gone in, and whether it's public money that's gone in directly, or whether it's done in a way whereby they guarantee loans. So let's say Nissan gets a loan from a bank, the government will say to the bank, don't worry about it. If Nissan defaults, God forbid, the government will step in and pay that money. I mean, that always is a good way of sort of helping to oil the wheels.
Do you think you'll be able to winkle that information out of them?
Well, we're going to have a good try, aren't we?
Boris Johnson took the opportunity to actually go driving, because PMs famously aren't allowed to drive very much, are they? The security don't let them. So he drove one of the cars off the production line, which I imagine was probably a tense moment for everyone for various reasons. And then he probably, left some magazines and newspapers in the back, like he famously did with his own car a few years ago. Do you remember?
An old sandwich wrapper and whatever.
Yeah.
Should we ever listen to the Nissan boss, though, who was talking about the fact that the company, had become, I suppose, linked with firms that went, Brexit, not sure about that. And then this was him talking to our colleague Simon Jack this morning.
And it's Ashwani Gupta, the Chief Operating Officer.
Key success factor for the Brexit has always been a trade-friendly business conditions to sustain our business, not only in UK, but in the whole Europe. And thanks to the Brexit, I think Nissan is moving forward to use Brexit as an opportunity.
Emily, can I ask you a question to address our newscast viewer who hears the clip there of the Nissan guy and perhaps heard you in the whole Brexit arguments and heard people like you and people like him being as doom-laden as you could possibly be about Nissan in particular and lots of other businesses in general. And now he's saying the absolute opposite, despite what was labelled as a hard Brexit, etc., etc. Does this not prove some of that Project Fear stuff was complete baloney?
I don't know the details of what he's talking about. That's the trouble. So I can't really help you, as much as I'd want to.
Well, he's not packing his bags and shutting the factory.
He's not packing his bag and shutting the factory, thank goodness. And there is money going in, and that's brilliant news. And certainly, I would hope that that the plant is here to stay, and that obviously, in order to be viable, it needs not only to make cars for Britain, but also to be able to export them across Europe, and hopefully there are not the sort of barriers between us and Europe that will stop that trade happening properly. But obviously Brexit is leaving the Europe. We have left. All other trade deals that are being made at the moment are all about lowering barriers and making trade easier. And obviously, part of leaving the European Union and becoming an independent nation means that, in fact, we have raised barriers between us and Europe. We all know that. And obviously, there was concern that the car industry in particular, given some of the things that were talked about, would suffer as a result. One of the things being rules of origin, so that you need to have, has something been made in Britain? Has it been made in Europe? Does that matter? Will there be barriers in between? All of these sorts of things need to be ironed out.
Emily, it's very dangerous to start talking about rules of origin when Adam's in the room, because he's actually rubbing his hands. This is very dangerous.
But I'm speculating on what it is that the chief exec was saying, unless he means on the back of Brexit, it means that the government is refocusing on manufacturing and giving public money to give assistance to Nissan that might not have been available otherwise.
Which could lead us into a 2-hour-long discussion about the new subsidy regime that was announced this week after Brexit, which, based on the current track record, will have to be changed in 6 months. But anyway,
that's right. Exactly. Exactly. All about state subsidy and whether it was. Listen, I'm a nerd. So the point is that.
I was joking about the hour-long discussion, Emily.
Really?
We'll do that. We'll come back, because this has been really fun. Emily, thank you very much for sitting in our cupboard and chatting to us tonight.
It's a pleasure.
And we'll be doing our Trade Remedies Authority special coming your way soon.
I can't wait.
Oh, you mean that was it?
Or the TRA, that was it. But you can have the subsidy regime special or the rules of origin special or something else like that. But no, it's been a real pleasure to have you on, Emily. Thank you.
Not at all.
And good luck to everyone who stayed up late waiting for the result of the Batley by-election, which actually we think might be at 6 o'clock in the morning, so you could just get up early.
I thought for 1 second there you were going to say good luck to people playing football, importantly, for national teams this weekend.
And that too as well. That goes without saying.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Newscast.
Newscast from the BBC.